Welcome to Grid Talk and happy Pride Month. My name is Ruby Price and today we're here to preview the 2024 Spanish Grand Prix. Joining me we have Grid Talk's very own Owain Medford.
Hello.
And Louis Edwards.
Hello.
Before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for this episode, Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC, MMA and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to their online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online. The game starts here. So, as F1 returns to the Circuit de Catalunya, it hasn't always produced the best racing, but there have been some iconic moments in its history. Debut wins, inter-team rivalries boiling over, strategy mix-ups, and that was just 2016. Owain, what comes to mind when you think of the Spanish Grand Prix?
I mean, there's multiple, to be quite honest with you. The sort of 2021 time where Mercedes pulled a fast one on Red Bull again for a second time. You know, it was a bit fool me twice, shame on you. With the ability to sort of whether pit and then just rapidly smash down the gap and then pit again before Red Bull could respond and got the win in that way, similar to how they did in Hungary 2019. You know, that and if I sort of pick a more historical example, the 1994, I think it's the 1994 Spanish Grand Prix, where Michael Schumacher from pole, you know, led the race until the opening sort of pit stop and then had a rapidly degenerating gearbox that left him with only fifth gear to play with. And this was in the era where, you know, tyre stops and refueling was a thing. So it was, you know, really difficult to get away from the pit stop. He managed to do that and still managed to finish in second, which I think is quite astounding. But those are sort of my two standout moments. Yeah,
for sure. 2021 and the fact that then Mercedes got played themselves, I think, later on in the season, or it might have been a season afterwards, but it couldn't have been the season afterwards. Louis, how about you? Any standout moments in Barcelona?
Unfortunately, I can't go as far back as Owain. It's in 1994. I know the PK move on Senna. I know that's always been a very iconic moment of Spanish Grand Prix history. But yeah, I definitely was not around when that was happening in the 80s. But I guess when I think of the Spanish Grand Prix, I think of the GOAT, Aston Maldonado, when he won his one and only race in 2012 before his garage exploded. Of course, you know, he was just too hot to handle that weekend, and so was the equipment. So those are my sort of two main things I remember. And also, as you know, growing a Fernando Alonso fan, the Spanish Grand Prix always sort of meant a lot because it was his home race, and he had some great races there. And his latest, you know, his last win in 2013 was there. So that's one that always sticks in my mind.
Of course, a way to tie it back to Fernando Alonso, as always, from Louis. But yeah, I completely forgot about Pastor Maldonado, which, you know, I know, right? I know.
How could you?
I mean, his one and only win, though, you know, because McLaren didn't fuel Lewis Hamilton up correctly, but he still had to actually deliver, which is something that he didn't do a lot of the rest of his time. So yeah, absolutely standout moment. Iconic. But we've thought about the past. How about the future? More specifically, the 2026, as the FIA revealed their plans for smaller, nimbler, and more environmentally friendly cars from 2026. Owain, as well as a near 50-50 split between electric and internal combustion power, active aerodynamics will be used. For the listeners at home, what actually is active aerodynamics and how will it impact the driving in 2026?
Right, so we actually do have active aerodynamics in Formula One, and we have done previously. So if you wind your clock back to the 2009, and 2010 era of F1 cars, you'll notice that you remember if you played the games, there was the ability to change the wing angle. So 2 times per lap, drivers had the ability to, as I say, change the front wing angle between 2 preset positions to change the downforce load on the cars. I don't think they were particularly successful, and obviously they were dropped for 2011. But also, you know, we've been having it for quite a while. So, you know, obviously with the DRS, once you're within 1 second of the car in front in a race situation, or any time in practice and qualifying within the DRS zones, obviously you can, actively change the aerodynamic setup of the car, and that's what it is. It's the ability to take the aerodynamic bodywork that we have on the car and alter it in between, you know, differing positions to change the aerodynamic effect that's happening on the car. You know, this is sort of thing that's not really been, you know, into Grand Prix racing because it's sort of seen as an unpure thing, really. But that's what it is. Every other form of aerodynamics is what we would call fixed aerodynamics. And previously there have been rules, and there probably will be, to say that, you can't have any movable aerodynamic devices. That's essentially what it is. But that will change, obviously, with the 2026 regulations, and we'll have, I assume, regulated movable aerodynamic devices.
Yeah, for sure. Louis, the plans for 2026 seem to have moved away from the limitations of the ground effect cars that we've seen since 2022. Cars apparently having a lot less downforce, particularly in high-speed corners. But there's been a lot of criticism of these plans from the FIA. Where do you stand on what's being lined up for 2026?
I don't know. I think it's a balance that the FIA have to do anytime they release or come up with new regulations. Of course, they want to keep the racing competitive, but you've also got to make it a spectacle, because that's ultimately what they want to do. They've got to make fun, exciting racing while actually being feasible for the teams to do. I'm someone who's all for closer racing. That's what we were promised with this current set of regulations. Has it worked to how much the FIA intended? No, the cars are significantly faster than the FIA had intended. Teams are very smart. They will change things. So, you always have the racing purists like, I don't want the electric engines. Let's bring back fully, aspirated engines who, make everyone within 100-mile radius deaf. It's sometimes we got to move away from that. And I know there was a lot of hope for these regulations from pundits and people within F1 that that we would move slightly more away from electric and more biofuels, synthetic fuels, fully aspirated, loud. But for me, if it delivers close racing, if we can get the costs of the sport down, actually allow more teams into Formula One, that's a whole nother thing. But if there's at least a benchmark of the gate is not so high that it's now impossible for teams to get in. So if it's better, cheaper, and just more enjoyable, I'm all for it. But we don't know until the teams put their cars in testing, because that's what we knew. We didn't know with these regulations how it was going to be until we saw the testing. When I think that's what we're just going to have to wait for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, that's kind of one of the reasons I think it was a closed Barcelona test in 2022, the first time we saw the cars hit the ground. Well, we didn't see it as punters, but obviously the first time we actually saw the cars in the end of it was when they were in Bahrain doing the testing. But before last weekend's Canadian Grand Prix, we had more confirmation of the grid for 2025, with Sergio Perez signing a new deal with Red Bull, Yuki Tsunoda signing on for more with VCARB. One of these drivers had a significantly better performance in the race weekend, and whilst it has become something of a meme to be dunking on Checo Perez, it was hardly a drive to celebrate the new contract, was it, Owain?
Yeah, it was absolutely terrible. I mean, we've been through it before, but it's one of those things where you looked at it and went, well, why did we told you this was going to happen? And it sort of I reinforces the point that, I don't think necessarily, I fully understand the need, as Red Bull has found to their cost multiple times before, to have their drivers be, have a more performant driver, let's say, and a less performant driver, per se, to back him up. Otherwise, you get sort of the Multi-21 debacle and the various problems that we saw, through 2010, for example, or even, going to sort of 2018 in Baku. I understand that need to have that separation in drivers. But to be quite honest, I don't think Checo is necessarily the driver. I mean, we took someone who, as we sort of get the grid getting closer and closer together, you're seeing that 0.3, 0.5 of a second that Checo is away from Max. The gap between, obviously it was fine when they had a very dominant car last year, but now they've not got so much of a dominant car, and, sort of a bit of a championship in our hands. And there are teams left, right and centre taking points away from Red Bull. I mean, as much as they got the win, there were multiple teams that scored more than Red Bull at the Canadian Grand Prix, and I can continue to see that happening. And that's not going to win you, a constructors' championship. And let's be honest, that's where the money's paid out. The marketing's very nice if a driver's world champion, but I don't think Red Bull is hurting for sponsorship or sponsorship money. But at the end of the day, surely it helps to be able to charge that much, but to be able to have that money topped up by the reason that you're meant to race in the first place, which is the prize money. And if they're not doing that, then I don't know. I personally see it as an issue. It's not the driver I would have picked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from one perspective, just to sort of put a counter argument to it, Max Verstappen almost, I think, potentially actually single-handedly won the Constructors' Championship for Red Bull himself last season. He had more points than Ferrari and Mercedes himself. But elsewhere on the grid, Louis, Carlos Sainz heading into his home race is still reportedly without a seat for 2025. Any team with an empty seat is being associated with him, but the most likely candidates seem to be Williams, Sauber or Haas, and I think with the more recent news from the FIA regarding the, change to the super license requirements, like if someone over the age of 17 has displayed the maturity and that they can be eligible for one. Is there any likelihood of the moves to Williams, Sauber or Haas moving? And do you think Mercedes now, with the ability of maybe putting Kimi Antonelli in the seat, has that firmly closed off that option?
No, that is what I have kind of taken away from that. James Vowles actually came out recently saying that Williams are looking to make big signing, which I think is already basically chucked Logan Sargent to the curb. I was like, because if you're considering Logan Sargent to be your big signing, you're not watching the races. Yeah, unfortunately, I do think it's going to be Williams for Carlos Sainz. If I was to, put my house on it, I probably would say Williams is going to be the likely destination, which is a shame. I think Sainz is deserving of so much better. You look at what he's done in Formula One, he's never really put a foot wrong. He had that time at Ferrari where he became, the gravel trap merchant. But since then, he's really pushed on. He's, been a great rival and teammate for Charles, really pushing him, doing better than I think anybody would have thought he would. And now he's just kind of being chucked to the curb. He was chucked to the curb by Toro Rosso. He was chucked to the curb by Renault. I think the only team that was actually really treated him with any sort of respect was McLaren. But when Ferrari come knocking, you're gonna take that, aren't you? I just asked Lewis Hamilton, and yeah, he's Williams seems like a really big downgrade. And then also on that super licensing, it's nice to see the FIA making changes for drivers that aren't IndyCar drivers. It's very nice and convenient. It's such a shame that they can't get any IndyCar drivers the right amount of super license points to maybe get a Formula One seat. Pato O'Ward, Colton Herta. It's ridiculous that they've now just said, "Oh yeah, sure, Kimi Antonelli, he can drive in Formula One." It's there's probably pressure that's come from. I imagine that's possibly pressure that's come from Mercedes to get that push through. Because I think Toto Wolff has been very adamant that Kimi Antonelli was his number one choice, and he was going to go to hell or high water to try and get him in that seat. And I think, we could say it's probably as good as done. Toto doesn't want to miss out like he did with Max. He doesn't want to miss out like he did with Piastri. He wants his Max Verstappen in that seat, and I think it also is a bit of a kick to the teeth of George Russell. I think George Russell was stuck in Williams for how many years, and then given his break, and now they're just like, let's get this 17-year-old straight in this seat and let's get him racing.
Not only that as well, the second George Russell joins the Mercedes team is when they are not front runners, which is poor timing. But maybe the fact that they're currently not front runners is probably why it's such a good opportunity to be putting someone like Kimi Antonelli in that seat. Maybe we could see kind of like what we've seen with Oscar Piastri, where he was in a McLaren where, there was no pressure on performing because the McLaren wasn't performing. Obviously, it got better as the season went on. But now we're seeing a very good Oscar Piastri, and the talk is that he's gonna get a win at some point. Maybe it won't take as long as it took his teammate. A race win specifically, I will also say, before anyone comes at me about his sprint. But yeah, speaking of Ferrari drivers, Owain, obviously we were just talking about Carlos Sainz. How are they going to bounce back from their catastrophic Canadian Grand Prix? Charles retired due to an engine issue. Carlos took himself and Alex Albon out of the action with a lazy spin, and no Ferrari-powered cars finished in the top 10. What does Barcelona hold for the Scuderia?
A more conventional track, quite honestly. I think it's more towards Ferrari's strength. They weren't amazing. They weren't amazing. They won the race in Monaco, but it was a bit weird because obviously Montreal's got the dichotomy of you've got these slow to medium speed corners, so you'd think crank on the downforce because you're going to need it when you're going that slowly, and then you have a number of quite long straights, and they just really couldn't get dialed into that circuit all weekend. It had been resurfaced, and and Red Bull we've had their issues as well. I think that, the car is just fundamentally a bit faster. So that obviously sort of masked that / enabled them to do it. And, I think they were just out of step, Ferrari, a little bit. The good thing about Ferrari is that, obviously they've got the resources, and the fact that the Canadian Grand Prix not the Canadian Grand Prix, Spanish Grand Prix at Catalunya it's a chassis circuit. It's obviously they go testing there, they know it well, and it's the sort of thing I can see them bouncing back from very, very quickly, because it's well known. It hasn't changed so much so far as we know since last year in any meaningful way, and because of that, you've got more of a reference point. It's not sort of the statistical outlier that maybe the last two Grand Prix have been. One with the highest of highs and one with the lowest of lows. So I think it should be easier for them. Catalunya, I assume they have an upgrade since we're coming back to Europe. That seems to make sense, and I think they should be better off. But yeah, it is a cause for concern. But I think it sort of just moves it slightly away from the statistical outlier that Canada is.
Yeah, certainly not a 5-star performance from the Ferraris last time out, but if you enjoy this podcast, we'd love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow us on all of our social channels at Grid Talk UK, and also if you're one of the 59% of people who are watching but aren't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. So when we were at the Spanish Grand Prix last season, Louis, Mercedes were, from one perspective, on the front foot, finishing second and third behind Max Verstappen. Is there any chance of that this weekend too, after appearing strong in Canada? But what of the talks that we're hearing as well about tension in the team?
Mercedes are in a weird spot. There's definitely, I think we can say with confidence that Mercedes are on the up. Their car does seem to be working. It seems to be more competitive. They're, scoring much better results generally. And even last year, where their car was, let's face it, terrible, they really managed to pull out a good result when they weren't trying to murder each other in qualifying, that was. But I think Mercedes is just at a point where they've got a driver like George Russell. He's very assured of himself. He's got a lot of confidence. He has always been a fighter against Lewis. He wasn't like a Bottas who was more than happy to play second fiddle. He has consistently taken the fight to Lewis. And now we have Lewis, who is on his way out. Lewis is no longer the top dog at Mercedes. And that is very evident. I think we're seeing that more and more as the season progresses. Lewis will just be pushed to the side, and some people think that's harsh. Some people will be like, oh my God, that's so ungrateful for everything Lewis did. But that's the nature of Formula One. Eventually, Lewis is going to leave. You can't hold him tight and go, oh, it's fine. Eventually, you've just got to, you hit a point where you're like, Lewis is going. We can't really divulge any information about next year's car. He's going to a rival team. He just gets pushed out of the way. And I think maybe Lewis is feeling that a bit. And he was very upset after Canada. We all seen that he was really not happy. And George is, doing what George is doing. He's, he was running a pretty good race, had a great qualifying in Canada. And I will not be surprised if that just continues for the rest of the season as Lewis sort of starts to be forced out by, not forced out, but sort of slightly pushed aside by Mercedes. George is the top dog. They're going to, really focus on George, how George likes the car. George is going to be quicker. Lewis is going to maybe fall off, not performance-wise, but he just, he doesn't have the same feel for the car. And he'll go off to Ferrari. George will be at Mercedes. I think it's just the way the team is. Tension can be many things, but I don't think it's going to be a case of George and Hamilton really sort of throwing fisticuffs. I think it's just the natural thing of Formula One. He gets pushed aside. George is now the new top dog.
Yeah, I mean, the team that are reportedly having fisticuffs, Alpine, Owain, they brought home a solid double points finish in Canada, but the discourse was all about the team orders that came into play that cost Esteban Ocon the position ahead of his teammate Pierre Gasly. Were Alpine in the right to favour the driver expected to continue with the team in 2025? And how might they fare in Spain, where there is such a focus on needing a good chassis, which that car just doesn't seem to have?
I mean, it's a difficult thing, I think, when you for lack of a better term, boot out a driver and, publicly scold him initially, and then, have a meeting, and then, in the next race, it's announced that you'll be leaving the team, not effective immediately, but at the end of this year. Like, as a driver, what kind of incentive do you even have to play ball? Bearing in mind, bearing in mind that maybe, Esteban Ocon's been in F1 for quite a while. Let's hope it is, he'll be hoping that he can find another seat. And the only real sort of, I guess, reason that he would play ball is that obviously he's going to want to show that he's a team player for the next team he goes to. But, if he already feels like his options are closing off, he'll kind of, I guess, feel like a dog cornered where, it doesn't matter. What incentive does he have to with, there's 15 races left. We've got, what would have been in the old days, an entire F1 season left. And the points are an awful lot higher now, particularly at the upper end, the upper scale of it. And with the, I mentioned it before, but with the field so much closer and so much more competitive, Alpine are rapidly, looking at like the, 7th and 8th best team. I think, I guess my question is, why did maybe it's Max's sort of naivety. I mean, I can't say naivety. He's been in motorsport for far too long to be able to be this naive. But to come out and say those things that openly, publicly put responsibility on one driver, publicly kick out one driver, a third of the way into the season, it just seems a little like it seems like a bit of an own goal, and it just seems like it's probably caused 2/3 of a season worth of hurt where he's got no skin in the game, so it doesn't matter. Obviously he's a professional, but at the end of the day, surely I think it's a fairly human reaction to have been like, to be to quiet quit to steal a term from the various news organisations. That's my take on it. I just it seems an odd move. I mean, I'm not saying I would have, I'd have maybe done it differently were it me.
Quiet quitting. Didn't think I'd hear that term on the podcast today. But Louis, what about McLaren then? Lando Norris most likely lost out on a win in Montreal due to the safety car. But the team are looking incredibly quick this season. They're most consistently the team challenging the Red Bull of Verstappen ahead. If Norris can avoid picking up front wing damage in the first corner this time around in Spain, can he make right the wrongs of 2023? And where do you see Piastri in all of this?
Lando's had a really horrid string of luck in Spain. Because I can't really think of a race Norris has done had a nice clean race. When I think of Norris in Spain, I think, last year losing his front wing and then also having a big tangle of Stroll. I think it was 2019, 2020. Not good. But no, Lando Norris has been very good this year, despite, he maybe should have won in Canada, but some might call it karma for what happened in Miami. You get what you're given in Formula One. He was given a safety car help in Miami, and then he got it cruelly taken away from him with the safety car in Canada. So who knows? But Lando Norris, the only driver to score a point in every single race this season, has been brilliant. The car, the team, everything in McLaren has been really good this year, and it's nice because it's the first time I've been able to say that in quite a long time. And I'm really excited what could happen in Spain. I think a lot of McLaren fans, we go into race weekends now and going, maybe we could fight. Maybe it's now yes, there's a very good chance that not only Lando, but you ask where Oscar's going to be. Oscar's right there. And it's easy to overlook Oscar because maybe in the racing he's not doing as well. But in qualifying, he's always right there. You can see the gaps between the McLarens are always very close, which means both drivers are getting the absolute maximum out of that car, which is great. And that's what you want to see in a team. Yes, Oscar's had some issues with the race, be it strategy, be it just general racecraft. But he's only in his second season of Formula One. You can't be too harsh. And he's still getting great results. He's still pulling in great points which McLaren need to continue this constructors battle. So that's exactly where I expect McLaren to be. I expect them to be at the front fighting the Red Bull, Lando being on the front foot, Oscar being a step or two behind, being the rear gunner, doing a brilliant job as he always does.
Absolutely. And after the contrasting team results between McLaren and Ferrari in Canada, McLaren have made a lot of ground on Ferrari in the constructors as well. So that third place that they're currently occupying could be second, depending on how Ferrari perform at the more traditional Spanish Grand Prix. But we've had some speculation on what could happen. Let's get some predictions down on paper, starting with you, Owain. Who are you predicting for pole position, and then how does your Spanish podium look?
I think, sort of given everything that I've said, like I say, Spain is a chassis track. It's a very predictable track. It's one that the teams know almost too well, I would say. And for that reason, I believe it's going to be a Max Verstappen pole. I think he'll get his mojo back. We're going back to a circuit that's a little bit less bumpy and more to the strengths of the Red Bull. So yeah, that's who I believe will take pole.
And your podium?
Oh, my podium. I don't know if you're going to go to Louis first. Sorry. My podium. You know what? I'm going to go for a Max Verstappen win again. And then, you know what? I think Carlos Sainz in second. And, as much, again, you need balance around Catalunya. And I don't think the Mercedes necessarily has it, despite, the upgrades that they've put on. There's meant to be another one coming, I believe. But for that reason, I think maybe McLaren are going to be fighting with it. So of them, I think Piastri.
And yourself, Louis?
Well, best to be contrarian, but I think the Ferraris are going to bounce back, and I think we're going to see a much better performance from them this weekend. So I'm going to go with the one lap wonder, which is Charles Leclerc. I think he can edge it out, but unfortunately, I think in the race it won't be enough. I think the Red Bull may be a bit too quick. So my podium would be Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, and then Lando Norris.
Similar vibes going on in the sense of a strong McLaren performance. It's hard to argue against a Verstappen pole position and probably a Verstappen win as well. But Lando Norris P2 for me and Carlos Sainz P3 is my podium and pole predictions. But what about something bold, a bit piquante, not likely to actually happen, but what a race it would be if it did? Owain, your bold prediction, please.
Perez to be in the top 10.
I feel like you just took Louis.
I think I stole it, yeah.
Was it by any chance yours as well, Louis?
It might have been.
I'm so sorry, Louis. This just adds fuel to the fire that Tom believes that we are the same person.
I don't know. Who else is not very good? That might not get it. Guan Yu Zhou, not only will he make it, he'll qualify in the Q2, get to Q2, qualify in Q2, and then I think he'll finish 10th.
Louis, Owain stole yours. You've stolen mine. I was going to throw mine out in and say that Sauber will get their first point of the season. And I felt like Zhou was probably the more likely of the two to do it.
Right, so Ruby, what you've got to do now is that you've got to predict now what my prediction is, which is that the number 12 Proton competition Porsche is going to get the win at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. That's how that works. Like, if we're going to do the full cycle of 3 people.
The problem is this show's coming out after the race has happened, so
we'll know by then if it did or not.
Yeah, if it happened, I'm the greatest genius in the world to steal Owain's prediction. But no, if people want to hear any more from us or yourself, Owain, where can people?
I don't personally have anything to plug, but in Spain we will have the full gamut of support series back. We're back on European soil, so here they come. So we have them all back. We have F3 and F2, and you can listen all about them on our sister show, Formula Talk, and you can find that wherever you find our podcasts.
And Louis, is there anything you want to plug at this point?
No, sorry, just when Owain says that we have the full category, I was thinking like the Super Smash Bros trailer. They're all here.
Players, your favourite characters. Owain made.
No, don't say it. We'll get sued by Nintendo. They're incredibly litigious.
They are. I think they'd even happily admit that. But no, I also don't really have anything to plug. So make sure to at Grid Talk on all socials. That is on X, Threads, YouTube even. Let's even our handle on YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to find more from me, I am at Ruby Price on YouTube. But Grid Talk is available on YouTube, to say YouTube so many times in the last few sentences, where most race shows are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal and Pocket Cast. Just search Formula 1 Grid Talk for our huge back catalogue of shows, previews and reactions to qualifying in the backlog, but race results going forwards as well, obviously. Consider supporting the channel on Patreon so you can get mics, lights and better recording equipment, and also make sure that you subscribe so you're first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content. It is, of course, the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. Thank you very much for listening to Grid Talk, presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.